is if I got the top of the medallion
Which you do.
near the top of the screen.
You're good. Okay. You're good. Thank
Here
you.
we are. So.
Well, that's what we did with Susan.
I know. We almost went to the parade.
It's really fun. Anyway, so thank you. Yeah.
Step the floor and say hello to you. You just keep passing. Now you're taking over.
You know what? You're in a good spot.
Okay. Yeah.
Unexpected about life is
Get out of it.
That's it. It's been a long time. How many years have you been? 13 years. Well, the place was a lot. I love it. It's a management. Oh, you're
Thank you, Colin, for rousing us to a wonderful beginning to our Earth Day, Earth Week, Earth Year celebration. That will serve to wake up the earth today, which we need a little bit of, don't we? In honor of Earth Day or Earth Week, these words from Wendell Berry. Whether we are our politicians know it or not, nature is party to all our deals, all our decisions. And she has more votes, a stronger memory, and a sterner sense of justice than we do. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, where we are welcoming whether you're a long-term member or here for your very first time. We want you to feel comfortable among friends. We gather to stretch our minds, open our hearts, and deepen our spirits. My name is Marilyn Hansodia. I am your service leader for today and have been a member of this fellowship since 2004. I would like to remind everyone to, myself included, to silence your phones, and any other noisy things you might have in your pockets. And I also want to remind you, as we navigate through COVID-related restrictions, please honor those who may feel more vulnerable during this period of time as we transition from masks, no mask, who knows, masks. Do respect that other people perhaps are more vulnerable than you. And I think that ties directly to our first UU principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. At this point in our service, I would like to welcome friends and visitors. If this is your first time here or you have not been here in a while, if you care to stand and introduce yourselves, we would love to welcome you. We're all friends. We've all been here. Wonderful. Welcome back. It's very much a full audience today, and we haven't seen this many people pretty much since the beginning of the pandemic. It's wonderful to have you. So next on our agenda would be announcements. If anyone has an announcement that might be relevant to the activities of our fellowship or our community, please wait for the microphone and tell us what you have on your mind. Bob is carrying the mic.
So as many of you are aware, the big plant has been going on throughout Door County for the last couple weeks, and the big hit was this weekend. However, Ephraim is doing theirs next Saturday. We have seedlings to give away, and yours truly is in charge of taking reservations for those trees. So if any of you are still in need of trees and you would like to put in a pre-order for 4 of them, you would pick them up at the Village Hall in Ephraim next weekend. And this poster will be on our board outside so that it will remind you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. No other announcements? Great. Okay, well, actually, we do have a guest this morning, and that is the Executive Director of Agency Help of Door County, Millie Gonzalez. I'd like to welcome you to the podium to talk about your activities.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I just want to let you know how blessed and honored I am to be in space and be in space with like-minded individuals. I received your order of service and I was reading your vision and your mission statements and your covenants. And I was like, wow, this really sounds like Help of Door County and the work that we're doing, the social justice work, the community work. And just even thinking and reminiscing on those words of justice, equity, and compassion. Usually those words at my agency are usually said in that same category, justice, equity, and healing, right? And I think that compassion and healing go one another. And if you read our last year's newsletter, it was all about compassion. So I want to thank you for choosing us as one of your charities to give through your anniversary, your 25th anniversary. We're extremely blessed for that, and understanding that our missions align. And it's been a really heavy, hard couple years. We understand that with the pandemic. And understanding that even though we're kind of feeling, some of us are kind of feeling like we're getting out of it, right? We were talking about having dignity for others, whether we mask, whether we choose not to, and understanding that now some of these things are being lifted and it's becoming beautiful outside. And now we can feel the sun on our cheeks when we walk out, and we feel that goodness, right? That feeling that we get. I turned to my husband, he's like, I think we're just coastal people, because as soon as we started driving around the bend and seeing the water, our hearts just got so full. And then we felt the sun and we're like, yeah, we're so blessed to live here. And then listening to your piece really awoke up something in my heart. But I say that because if we look at the main principles of justice, equity, compassion, and healing, we see that not everybody has a privilege to live in that, right? So I always take note in times and in spaces when I'm feeling very free and liberated, because that's not always a reality of the people that we serve here in Door County, myself included. I think that the realness that I face every day when I come to the office is very different than what I experience when I'm traveling and exploring our community, or when we are at home in a safe space, right? I get to come home and I could unwind and be safe and feel liberated and feel free. And that's not the case for all of our clients that come through Help of Door County. There is no safety at home. There isn't justice. There isn't equity. There isn't compassion or liberation. And I want to thank you for your gifts, because you are providing that hope for our clients. I don't want to go on and on about that. That's what I love talking about, like anti-violence work, anti-oppression work, how all of these things intersect with domestic and sexual violence. Because a lot of people get confused and they'll say, Millie, why are you speaking on immigration? Millie, why are you speaking on racism? Millie, why are you speaking on heteronormativity or patriarchy or all these big words, ableism, all these different forms of oppression? And what I always have to remind people is that oppression is interlinked and intertwined, right? Domestic violence and sexual violence cannot exist if we have oppression existing in our societies and our communities. So when you give and choose us, that's what you're helping to end in our community. We're helping to end oppression and also foster liberation, and understanding that all forms of oppression intersect, but also understand that our liberation is connected as well, right? We can't be free or liberated unless we're working together to do that. Some basics of the stuff that I provide in Door County: we provide crisis intervention services. So that looks like safe homes in our area. That looks like my 24-hour hotline. That looks like if you're afraid of your partner, you're afraid of being home. That looks like services to the elder community when they're experiencing abuse from people that they love and they cherish. It could be their caretaker, right? So it's all of those emergency services, legal services such as restraining orders, child abuse restraining orders, domestic abuse restraining orders, individuals and elders at risk restraining orders, as well as harassment, domestic violence restraining orders. That looks like court accompaniment when you have to go in for a restraining order and you can't afford an attorney, right? We train you to be able to present and basically do your case pro se. So we're along there for that emotional support and that educational support and legal services, not only in the civil court system with those restraining orders, but also during child support hearings, family court hearings, and also in criminal cases. Some people are like, how are you involved in criminal cases? And we can have a client that we've been working on for 2 years, and let's say this lady has been calling and receiving services. Finally, one day she's too scared. Partner approaches her. She throws something at him. He calls law enforcement. Now she's arrested. So understanding we sometimes will also give services and advocacy within that. A lot of folks don't know about the services we do in the Door County Jail. We have numerous amounts of support groups, and we work really closely with Sheriff Sterner in trying to end recidivism in Door County. That looks like a Building Strong Families group. That looks like our Healthy Relationships group, and also an Operation Fresh Start group that I actually wrote the curriculum for, teaching what is a healthy relationship, what does that look like in the home, and how can we foster that out within the community. We also have support groups that are not only specific to jail or to the services that we provide in jail. Let me back up a second. Why is Millie in the jails? Millie is in the jails because over 99% of my clients, when I go in there to do domestic violence education, have been a victim of domestic violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking. Yes, all in Door County. I think sometimes we get misled by the beauty around in our community, and we assume that that beauty is also within the homes. And oppression, as you know, lives and thrives everywhere. The numbers that happen in a domestic abuse in Door County are subpar statewide. All right. And every case that I've mentioned, domestic violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking cases have been convicted here in Door County. So we have to remember that just because we don't see the problems outright in our face doesn't mean that they don't exist where we live and where we work and the community that we love. Another big thing that we do, aside from statewide activism and advocacy, is I do sit on the Governor's Council, and I'm very, I wouldn't say like well-known, but just statewide activism and advocacy is a lot of our preventative work, and that's why Alejandro is up here. So if you want to come up, Ale, talk a little bit about FIRE. I'm really proud of FIRE. We started the group about 4 years ago, but I'll give you a little bit more about what FIRE is and how we've expanded with younger individuals as well. From 7 to 10 years old, they're known as Sparks. And then from 10 to high school age are Flame. But we all started with FIRE. But one quick story on how we started doing services for younger kids. I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Bettina Love. If you haven't, please YouTube her. She has amazing TED Talks, amazing information, does a lot of anti-oppression, anti-racism work. Our kids were actually chosen to do a workshop and to facilitate also a roundtable discussion. And the littlest one that we have brought there was about 7 years old. Dr. Bettina Love was asking everybody what they had learned. Of course, all the teenagers got sheepish and shy and they didn't know what to share, but the 7-year-old stomps on top of a table and says, Dr. Love, I want to talk. And of course, she happened to be my daughter and they gave her the mic. Her name is Xiomara. They said, what did you learn? And she said, I learned that while all the kids here are talking about not being seen, not being heard, or not being taken seriously, they do the same to me. And the room got quiet. And then she turned around to all of our FIRE kiddos, all Door County natives, about 15 youth. And she said, you can't have a FIRE without a spark. And I will start my own group and I will do the work that we're doing. So last summer, we were able to launch Sparks and Flame, of which she also helps co-facilitate. We're called the so-called movement family. All his first protest was at 2 years old. He was at his first protest fighting for the rights of immigrants. But I'll leave you to it and just know that we're very blessed and very honored that you are seeing our work, that you're recognizing our work, and that you're seeing the way that that intersects. And I do plan on staying for the whole service. So if you have any questions about help or the work that we're doing, feel free to come see me. But I'll leave you in wonderful hands.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ale, one of the co-founders and now co-facilitators of FIRE. And let's see. Sorry, yeah, you've probably seen that FIRE spelled a little funny. It's an acronym and it stands for Forging Youth Relationship Education. Our whole mission from the beginning has been to educate our former peers in the youth of Door County on what abuse actually looks like and how it's caused and the foundations of abuse. Too often, our first impression of abuse is just physical. We think just abuse is someone being beaten up. But abusers have many creative ways on how to torment their victims and we see abuse in many, many forms. I'd say the biggest misconception that fire tries to end is that the youth of our community don't deal with the same societal issues adults do. I'm going to throw some statistics out there on teen dating violence and related topics. 25% of high school girls will experience sexual or physical abuse from intimate partners in high school. Women between the ages of 16 and 24 are 3 times more likely than the rest of the population to be victims of intimate partner violence. And 1/3 of high school students have experienced intimate partner violence. So it's a lot more prevalent than you would assume. And part of that is because teenagers don't tell their parents about their relationships. And especially when those relationships are tied to taboo and shame. So we try to give these youth the tools to see what abuse is really like and understand that it's not just being beaten up. Sometimes it's manipulation and control or imbalances of power and control being held over them. Fire has done a pretty good job around the state. We've been invited by End Abuse Wisconsin, which is centered in Madison and provides all sorts of services around the state and helps groups like Help of Door County even. We've spoken at some of their gala of theirs and some of their events like Teen Summit, where they have as much as 700 to 600 teenagers learning about abuse, but all sorts of societal issues. We've given classes at Teen Summit, even holding round tables and workshops and being face-to-face with other peers, as well as holding speeches for more people to hear. I've seen confidence and independence flourish in a lot of my peers. Some of my friends are sophomores now. I'm a senior graduate. I've seen a lot of these kids grow up and turn into young men or young women who respect themselves and are strong enough to set boundaries with the people in their lives. And that's what fire does for these people. So thank you for all of your help, and with your continued support, we'll be able to spread the message of Help of Door County and continue conversations with youth like me and my peers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Millie and Ali. I'm Marianne O'Dowd, and this is just a little bit out of order, but I wanted to make sure that Millie got a proper introduction. So it's kind of a post-introduction, and you probably already know, based on her remarks, what a fabulous and a vital leader she is in our community. But just formally, this is a little bit about her. Okay, so Millie has worked for Help of Door County for the past 6 years as an advocate, director of services, and now, of course, as their executive director. Previously, she was the vice chair of their board of directors. She was recently appointed to the Governor's Council on Domestic Abuse and serves on its Budget and Access Committee. Her past experience includes managing a transitional living program for a domestic violence agency in Illinois, and she has been honored with the Si Se Puede Award, that means yes we can, right? Recognizing her as one of Wisconsin's most powerful and influential Latinos. She's also received the Ann Koch Social Justice Award and has been recognized as one of Door County's People of the Year. And in her spare time, if there is any, she likes to spend it with her husband and her 4 children. So thank you, Millie.
Thank you.
And
I apologize, I didn't add my pronouns on there. I was so excited to talk, but my pronouns are she, hers, and Ollie's are he, him, as well as my husband's he, him. Thank you.
so thank you. And that's it.
Thank you, Millie and Ali and Marianne, for the insight that we just gained on Help of Door County, which is part of our 25th anniversary collection. This is our 3rd quarter, and I think we've all been inspired by what you've just shared with us this morning. Thank you for that. Now we will begin our service with lighting of the chalice with these words. This Tree of Life chalice has powerful connections to both UU history and current events. It evokes our love for the earth in a time when we're waking up to climate change. It evokes our commitment to equity and inclusion as we're witnessing atrocities being waged against Ukrainians and people at our borders. As always, UUs are called to make the circle wider, more inclusive, more equitable. I love that we're using the Ukrainian candle each week. Now, please stand as you are able and join in stating the unison affirmation and humming the doxology. We gather together to seek knowledge and wisdom, to explore freely the vast reaches of mind and spirit, to celebrate within a caring community those truths, ancient and modern, which give meaning and direction to our lives. Now's the time in our service when we share joys and concerns with one another. If you have something that weighs heavily on your heart or something to celebrate, please do so with us. Also realizing that we are being live streamed on YouTube, so accordingly. And because we didn't do it earlier, I really want to welcome back some of our snowbirds I see out here in the audience today. It's wonderful having you back again. Bob has the mic and Shar has something to tell us.
Sebastopol School for about 70 years has honored a local citizen on Arbor Day. And I learned 2 weeks ago that I'm going to be honored this coming Friday. And being Arbor Day, they plant a tree and they asked which one I wanted. And I requested a black cherry tree. My husband was honored, Carl Schultz was honored, Emma Tubb, many people were honored. And I just thought this was a wonderful way to plant a tree and just keep nature and things like that uppermost in people's minds.
A living symbol of Shar Lucas. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Hello. I have two joys. I am flying to Salt Lake City on Friday. Our younger son is being baptized in the Mormon Church, which is a surprise to me, but he's very much alone, and I think he needs people. So he wanted me to come, and I'm going. And my second joy is our older son, Peter, who is now written his 11th book. He wrote the one you may have known that had the movie, Leave No Trace. This one is another father-daughter story, and it's called Passers Through. I sort of proofread when I was out at Thanksgiving what he was doing, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. And the boys have enjoyed, so I'm glad I can go.
I'm glad you shared your son's wonderful hobbies with us. That's great.
Well, this is a joy of mine, but also sharing with permission on behalf of Judy Broad, her joy truly. She had her heart procedure. Many of you probably know that she has been struggling with a heart issue. She had her heart procedure done on Thursday. When she went in, they thought they were going to just get one artery finally totally opened. And they were easy peasy able to do that, 100% success. And so she does not have to go back because they opened up the other two arteries. So Jim and I saw her on Friday. She looked tired, but she was home and feeling well and just looking forward to getting back to enjoying an active life here in Door County. Oh, and she also wanted to thank everybody for their texts, their calls, their cards. She just felt very loved, lifted, and cared for.
Just a real short one, but it's just such a delight to see Jerry back with us today.
Great.
That's a joy.
Cullen.
At the piano.
Thanks for the walk. I have a joy which is specifically related to Earth Day and Earth Week, actually. I wouldn't say otherwise, but I hear it might be spring soon, which is wonderful. As most people know, I own the building next door, and over the last 2 years, I planted some 100 trees, and actually in the fall, I put in 30,000 bulbs by hand, some of which you'll see at the road soon. Some of these some of the trees are crab apples, about 25 crab apples, and they're about to bloom for the first time here any moment, including 6 purple prints along the road front, which is exciting. But related to this week, there's a special tree coming on Friday, which you'll see. It's a 25-foot European beech tree. It's going to be planted just outside the Sled Dogs building. So if you want to come and see how Tom Wolfe does it, and we're not quite sure how we're going to do it because we don't have a telehandler yet, 8:30 on Friday morning to witness the tree and prodigious amounts of profanity, no doubt. It's going to be difficult. Anyway, yes, Dick and Mary, it's not a native tree because it's a European beech, but like me, it is naturalized.
Always the overachiever, Colin. Delightful. All right, so next on our agenda for this morning is Juliana Newman, who has been long-term treasurer and bookkeeper for our fellowship, and she has a little bit of a message to describe the pledge drive to us. Thank you, Juliana.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As a lifelong Unitarian whose service to this faith has revolved around financial stewardship for the past, would you believe, 22 years, I guess it would be fair to say that I know something about pledging. My UU church affiliations have supported me through many phases of my life. As a child in Sunday school, as a teen in LRY, stands for Liberal Religious Youth, as a young adult, as a parent seeking a community in which to raise my children, and now in retirement. The fact that there is a UU fellowship in Door County made my decision to move here in 2005 much easier. So I pledge because here I'm in the company of people who share my values and who are working to promote those values in our community and in society. I pledge because here I can learn. I pledge because here I am challenged to be my best self. I pledge because here I'm supported when I need help. And most importantly, I pledge because I want UUFDC to be here for others. In this pledge season, I hope that you are reflecting on what your connection to UUFDC means to you, and that you may translate that reflection into meaningful support for this fellowship. Now for the business side. Our anniversary year monetary outreach for Door County and to Ukraine has been amazingly successful. But as of right now, we question whether we'll be able to meet the pledge goal that serves our needs right here at UUFDC. Only about 50% of the possible pledges have been received to date, with the deadline for submitting pledge information only 10 days from now, on May 4th. If you are able to increase your pledge for next year, that would be very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. Speaking of money, we will now take the offering, and we're actually passing the bowl. It's all legal again. And do be generous supporting the activities of our local fellowship. As you've just heard Juliana tell us, we are very good at outreach. Maybe we need to reach in a little bit today and going forward. Please be generous. Now let us take a moment of silence as we prepare our minds and souls for the message that will follow. This morning, Dick Smythe returns to the podium to tell us more tales from his many years of experience. All of you probably have either heard him speak or know him personally, but I must tell you, I've spent enough time with Dick in the field to appreciate his openness with nature. His level of honor and respect for all creatures defines him. We think of Gaylord Nelson, the father of Earth Week, in this period of time. I would suggest we should couple Dick Smythe with Gaylord Nelson. He's neither a senator nor was he a governor, but he has devoted his entire life to the empathy for all things wild and embodies an enormous respect for our environment. I doubt he would argue with this statement from Wendell Berry. From a human point of view, the difference between the mind of a human and that of a mountain goat is wonderful. From the point of view of the infinite ignorance that surrounds us, the difference is not impressive. Indeed, from that point of view, the goat may have the better mind, for he is more congenial, adapted to his place, and he would not endanger his species or his planet for the sake of an idea.
you probably all know that 2 days ago was Earth Day. And I hope my remarks this morning will be compatible with the theme often expressed in Earth Day. But before I get started, I want to invite all of us to turn, not the clock, but the calendar, back 2 years. 2 years to Earth Day 2020. But that marked a rather remarkable occasion that I'm not sure, because of COVID, achieved this proper recognition. First, 2020 Earth Day was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And I'm sure you all know that was the brainchild of Senator Gaylord Nelson. Now, unfortunately, Senator Nelson is no longer with us. But his daughter, Tia, is very much with us. And she has been very helpful to the Climate Change Coalition in past years. Now, that was probably fairly well known. But what I think was not so well known 2 years ago was that it marked the 60th anniversary when a young 26-year-old British woman, accompanied only by her mother, landed in a forest reserve in western Tanzania, and thus started the longest continuous running study of chimpanzees in the world. And of course, that former 26-year-old woman, we all know who she is, Jane Goodall. And Jane is still with us. In fact, just about 18 days ago or so, she celebrated her 88th birthday. Okay, so much for history. I want to begin this morning with a quote that I've used before. So I hope you won't hold that against me, but it just beautifully states what I very deeply feel and hope I can convey this morning. And here's the quote. If I can get rid of this thing. There we go. The quote is from Henry Beston's Outermost House. We need another and a wiser and a perhaps more mystical concept of nature. We patronize animals for their incompleteness and for their tragic fate of having taken form so far below ourselves. And therein we err, and greatly err. For the animal shall not be measured by man. In the world older and more complete than ours, they move finished and complete, gifted with extensions of senses we have lost or never attained, and listening to voices we shall never hear. They are not brethren, they are not underlings. They are other nations caught with ourselves in the net of life and time, fellow participants of the travail and splendor of the earth, unquote. In other words, they are not incomplete mimics of us humans. Do we share some common characteristics? Sure. Heck, our DNA is very compatible with theirs in most respects. But they are much older than we are. They've been around much longer, and they possess senses, they possess characteristics, they possess abilities that we won't ever display. They are worthy of our deepest admiration, respect, and protection. Now, this morning I want to share two stories. They're true. One about a Yellowstone wolf, the other about two Colorado grizzlies, brother and sister. Now, I believe all these animals have something that we should pay attention to. And I'm close so far as to say that if there is any such thing as a universal heaven, and I'll leave that for you to decide, I'm certain all three of these creatures have a choice celestial address. And if I'm lucky, I might be able someday to arrange a visit. I want to now briefly introduce Rick McIntyre. Rick has spent more time watching wolves than anybody in the world has and probably ever will. Because this is hard to believe, but he has watched, until he retired a few years ago, He has watched wolves every single day for 16 years, every day. And his typed notes run more than 12,000 single-space pages. As he puts it, wolves and humans deal with similar life problems. For example, figuring out the risk of leaving home, where to go, how to do it, finding your niche in the world, your place in the world. And then he adds this. Certain wolves I've known, they were better at being a wolf than I've been at being a person. And if there ever was a perfect wolf, it was 21. He was like a fictional character, but he was real. He lived. And another well-known writer called 21 the greatest wolf Yellowstone has ever known. So who was he? Who was 21? 27 years ago, he entered the world. The first wolf litter born in Yellowstone in in over 70 years. 70 years. His parents had been trapped in Canada, brought to Yellowstone, specifically to reintroduce wolves into that environment. It was badly out of whack. It was out of whack because there were far too many elk, and the land showed. The land was suffering. Tragically for 21, just before he was born, somebody shot his father. Now, wolves don't do well as a single parent. So researchers reluctantly decided to capture the mother and her pups, put them in a 1-acre enclosed fence, and feed them for a while. Now, the interesting thing here is that when a human would come to feed the wolves, all the wolves would scatter to the far end of the pen, except one. And this little wolf would stand midway between his family and the humans, protecting the family against these strange human beings. And that wolf would be given tracking number 21. That was his collar that he wore. Now, a male wolf, number 8, was soon introduced to the wolves, accepted by the mother, and served as a role model for 21. And at age 2.5, 21 left his mother and his adoptive father. And he joined the pack called the Druid Pack, D-R-U-I-D, Druid Pack. Less than 2 days after that alpha male had been illegally shot. Now, the Druid females welcomed this prime adult wolf. And the pup seemingly loved the big guy. And he seemed to love them too. He adopted them and fed them. And with no hassle at all, he immediately had become the alpha male in this established pack. Now, he was remarkably gentle. Remember now, he's a wolf with the members of his pack. And often, immediately after making a kill, he would walk away, lie down, and let the rest of his pack, who had nothing to do with the kill, let the rest of his pack feed at their leisure. Then he fed. And one of his favorite things to do was to wrestle with the little pups. Now, here's a big male wolf. I don't know what he weighed, but he could well have weighed 90 to 100 pounds. What he really loved to do was to pretend to lose. He just got a big kick out of it. He would roll on his back, throw his paws up in the air, and the little wolf would climb all over him, bite his fur, with his tail wagging back and forth a mile a minute. He had conquered this big male wolf. And Rick puts it this way. He said, the ability to pretend shows that you understand how your actions are perceived by others. And it reflects a pretty high level of intelligence. Now, I'm reasonably sure that the pups knew what was going on, but this was a way for them to learn. How does it feel to conquer something much bigger than you are? Early in his run as an alpha male, 3 females gave birth. Now that just didn't happen. Normally, only the 1 female that was a mate to the alpha male gave birth. But this time 3 did. That was a reflection of the unnaturally high food supply, i.e. elk, that were available. And as these pups developed and grew to adulthood, 21 made it through puppyhood to adulthood, which made a pack the size of 37 wolves. Now that's just incredible. Nobody has heard of a pack of 37 wolves. Nobody has ever documented a pack of 37 wolves. It's unbelievable. As Rick puts it, only 21 had what it took to win a pack that large. Again, being wolves, it wasn't all peaceful. The high density of wolves provided numerous contests of territorial defense and attempted expansion of territory. As a result, 21 participated in many, many fights. Fatal conflict between tribal groups isn't just a human or chimpanzee thing. The second most common cause of wolf death in the Rocky Mountains is getting killed by other wolves. The first cause of death being shot by us. Now, unbelievably, with all the fights that he was engaged in, he never lost. And even more unbelievable, every time he won, he never killed a vanquished foe, which in wolf ecology, again, just is not done. That was unbelievable. Now, his restraint in letting vanquished rivals go seems just incredible. I don't know how to explain that. Can a wolf be magnanimous? Why not? Why not? History's most esteemed leaders are not ruthless strong men like Hitler and Stalin and Mao. Who are they? They're Gandhi and King and Mandela. And here's another aspect of this remarkable wolf. Early on, when he was 21 and still living with his mother and adoptive father, one of the new pups was acting strangely. He obviously wasn't quite right. And the other pups were afraid of him. They ignored him. One day, 21 brought back food for the pups. But he just stood there, casually looking around. Soon he started wagging his tail slowly. And according to Rick, he'd been looking for that sickly little pup. He found him, and then he went over and hung out with him for a while. Was he being kind? Was he being helpful? Strength is important, but what we remember is kindness. Kindness. Now, the great majority of wolves die violently. Despite a violent life, even by wolf standards, 21 distinguished himself to the very end. According to biologists, a ripe old age for a wolf in Denali National Park is 3 years. 3 years. Rocky Mountain National Park, 4 to 5 years. One day, when 21 was 9 years old, he was lying bedded down with his family when someone spotted an elk. All the wolves jumped up to give chase. He jumped up too, but he just stood there and watched his pack move out. Later on, when the pack headed up toward their den site, 21 crossed the valley, headed in the opposite direction, traveling alone. Now, sometime later, a wolf, or rather a visitor, who'd been up in high back country, reported to Rick that he'd seen a dead wolf. And you just didn't find dead wolves. If they were killed, they were dismembered. That was unusual enough that Rick wanted to investigate. So he got on a horse and rode up. But before he left, he told his partner, Doug McLaughlin, that when he got back, he'd tell him what he'd found. So McLaughlin saw Rick coming back after a while, walked over, expecting to be told what had happened. Rick ignored him, walked right to his truck, opened the door, leaned against the door frame, and burst into sobs. That last day, it seems that 21 knew that his time had come. So he presumably used the last of his strength to walk up to the very top of the nearby mountain. And in a favorite rendezvous spot where he spent many days with his pups and with his mate, he curled up under a spreading tree and went to sleep for the last time on his terms. A long life, richly lived, with character, with dignity, with joy. How many of us will do as well? So now we need a shift from wolves to grizzly bears. Enos Mills was a long-time resident in Rocky Mountain National Park. You may know his name. He was an accomplished writer, naturalist, lecturer, and he owned a lodge, a wilderness lodge in Rocky Mountain National Park. He was also the father of Rocky Mountain National Park. Now, Mills lived, Mills was born in Kansas in 1870 and died in 1922. Died tragically very young, but I won't get into that. He had many encounters with grizzly bears in what is now Rocky Mountain National Park. They're long since gone. And he reported he was always impressed with their cleverness, their ingenuity, and their intelligence, and their forbearance toward him, a human who was never armed. He called the grizzly our greatest wild animal and thought the grizzly probably headed the animal list in brain power. And in one of his many books, he wrote, "The grizzly is the dominant and most distinguished animal of the world." One June morning, he was in the mountains, and he came across two tiny grizzly cubs. Now, these little cubs were about the size of a cottontail rabbit. Obviously, their mother had just been killed somehow. He didn't know how. But he decided he better capture them because they couldn't possibly live on their own, bring them back to his cabin and raise them. That was the idea, except that the cubs had no intention of being captured. And after a long struggle, as Mills put it, minus much skin, parts of his shirt, parts of his pants, he rounded up the cubs, took them back to his cabin. And then, as he writes, they were pets before sundown. In 24 hours, Jenny knew her name, Johnny knew his. And after a few days, they followed Mills about, as he put it, with fondness and loyalty. Now, these are grizzly bears, now keep in mind. The bears responded to treatment, were always cheerful. But even at that young age, Mills was very careful not to tease them, not to annoy them. Grizzlies are very intelligent, they're very sensitive, and even as young pups, as he discovered, they can do a fair amount of damage. He had every reason to respect their capabilities as very young bears. Now, here's what he wrote on one occasion. "Young bear cubs are the most wide awake and observing little people that I know of." Call them little people. Never have I seen a horse or a dog who understood as readily, learned as rapidly as these two bears. One day he offered Johnny a saucer of milk. Johnny reached for it, spilled it, but he licked the saucer. Mills gave him a second saucer. This time, he kind of got the idea. He drank half of it, but spilled the other half. But the third time, he stood up on his hind legs, grasped the saucer in his two front legs, lifted it up, tipped his head back, and poured it into his mouth. For a time, they were not chained, and when they were even outdoors, they could do whatever they wanted to do. Here again is Mills. Quote, "Never have I seen two young animals more intense, more playful, or more energetic. They played alone, they mauled each other by the hour, and occasionally they scrapped. Sometimes, and I just love this, sometimes we ran foot races. From a scratch on the ground, which was a starting line, they would line up, and they were always eager to do this. So they would line up, Mills would call go, and they'd take off running downhill about 150 yards. But here's the neat point about it. They were so speedy, those little cubs, at least twice, and sometimes three times, in 150 yards, they would stop and look around and make sure he was still coming. And as Mills put it, at that time, I was not slow. To capture his attention, would ask for something to eat, they would stand on their hind legs, hold out their forepaws. As Mills once said, they were the life of my home and on occasion almost the death of it. On one occasion, the bears followed Mills into his cabin, and several people were there waiting for him. And everyone crowded around to watch the bears strip the raspberries from the raspberry canes that they had in the cabin. In jostling for the berries, one of the canes fell to the floor. And at the same time, both bears went for it. They butted heads, lost their temper, and began to fight. As Mills described it, quote, "I grabbed them by the collar and shook them. Why, Johnny and Jenny, why do you do this? Such awful manners, particularly when we have company. What shall I do with you?" And I think this is really very telling. They instantly stopped quarreling, and they even forgot about the berries on the floor. For several seconds, the bears seemed embarrassed beyond all measure. They simply stared at the floor, wouldn't raise their heads. Then suddenly, each appeared to have the same idea at the same time. They stood up, faced each other, each put the paws on the other's shoulders, and they went, ooh, ooh, ooh. Plainly, they were sorry they had misbehaved. One day, Johnny seemed unusually interested in what Mills was doing, and he wanted to do everything Mills did. So Mills took a penny out of his pocket, put it on the floor, took his index finger and moved it around on the floor. Johnny rose on his hind feet, held up one claw, bent over, put his claw on the penny, and moved it around the floor. So then Mills said, okay. He got an egg, blew out the yolk, and handed it to Johnny. First thing Johnny did was to lick it. But then that, keep in mind, it's the bear now. He put that eggshell on the floor, moved all around the floor, and never crushed it. Never crushed it. When the cubs were small, they reminded Mills of a little boy and girl. They would often follow him into his cabin, and if Mills sat down, they would come over to him, stand on their hind legs, put their forepaws on his knees, and stare up at him. More than once, they climbed up into his lap, tugged his ears, bumped his nose, messed with his hair, and finally fell asleep, one on each knee. One Saturday, Mills took the bears camping. They ran back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth, thoroughly enjoying themselves. And at night, they would lie close to Mills beside the fire. And Mills would occasionally use one of them as a pillow. And on occasion, he would wake up and find he was the pillow. On one occasion, a man who was house staying and bear tending while Mills was away teased Johnny. You don't do that to a grizzly bear. As Mills put it, the inevitable crash came and the man went to the hospital. After 7 months, now 7 months of grizzly is no cute little rabbit-sized bear. But Mills decided he really could no longer do them justice. So he sent them to the Denver Zoo. Mills waited 2 years before, in his words, quote, I allowed myself the pleasure of visiting them. In other words, it was 2 years before he could bear to visit. Mills was a very well-known man in Denver. And when he visited this zoo, he was allowed to go into the bear pen. He jumped in the bear pen, calling, hello, Johnny, as he entered. Johnny jumped up, held out his paws in greeting, and greeted Mills with a familiar, ooh, ooh, ooh. And Jenny, along with the other few bears, just stood on tiptoe and was watching what was going on. Now, appreciate this, please. If Mills stood up against a male grizzly bear that was standing on his hind legs, Mills' head would probably come about to here. So the bear's shoulders and his enormous head would tower over Mills. And those front legs, those forepaws, with one swipe, they could disembowel an elk. The paws were about the size of dinner plates. Each paw had claws 3 inches long. And their jaws were powerful enough that they could crush a bowling ball. There's simply no animal like the grizzly. And this was a bear that was greeting Mills at about 2.5 years old of age. Again, an enormous animal. Sadly, Jenny lived 11 years longer than Johnny. Not that she lived a long time, but that Johnny didn't. The bears became favorites at the zoo almost instantly, written up often in the post, and everybody wanted to see Johnny and Jenny. And they unfortunately came with all kinds of junk food that they would throw in to the bears. Jenny ignored her. Johnny, not so much. Now, bears love to dig, and Jenny was no exception. At one point, the wind carried some hollyhock seeds inside her pen. Now, she was given the privilege of living by herself in her own pen. And she let the seeds sprout. They became 4 foot tall hollyhocks in a clump in her pen. And she hollowed out a spot in the earth alongside the hollyhocks. Here's the description. In the mornings, before the sun sets her into her cave for her noon siesta, she lies on her back beside the hollyhocks, gazing up at the bright red blossoms. With her gnarled old claws, she reaches up and touches the flowers gently. Reminds you of an old lady fondling her geraniums, unquote. So what can we say about Johnny and Jenny? Obviously, their lives were atypical. Just as obvious, they would have lived only a few days after their mother's death if Mills had not rescued them. And it's supposed that they could not be happy because they were unable to live the life of a, quote, normal grizzly, was, according to one writer, quote, little more than a banal form of human arrogance. And I would add this: we humans are very good at overestimating our uniqueness. We're also very good at underestimating the rich lives of many of our earthly companions. As Ernest Thomas Seton wrote 120 years ago, the animals are creatures with wants and feelings differing in degree only from our own. Fun-loving, endowed with a deep sense of appropriate behavior, strong beyond measure, but never flaunting their strength, never scheming, never deceiving. They don't threaten our survival, but we threaten theirs. How can we not confer the deepest respect for such creatures? We need to create a new kind of loyalty to all living things. And this loyalty is less about saving any one species than it is about saving all of us. All of us. So how can we not support the organizations working to ensure the survival of creatures such as 21 and Johnny and Jenny? I am personally very grateful that such creatures share our world. I can only hope that in some measure, my life will be as well lived as were the lives of 21, Johnny, and Jenny.
Thank you so much, Dick, for helping us to live like a wolf and a grizzly bear this morning. I invite all of you to grab a quick cup of coffee in the gathering room after the service, and if you care to come back this side of the sanctuary, we'll have an opportunity to talk in depth with one another and Dick about his words this morning. In closing, I'm going to read a few words by Aldo Leopold, who's known as both a Wisconsinite and the father of wildlife ecology. We reached the old wolf in time to watch a fierce green fire dying in his eyes. I realized then, and have known ever since, that there was something new to me in those eyes, something known only to her and to the mountain. I was young then, and full of triggerage. I thought because fewer wolves meant more deer, that no wolves would mean a hunter's paradise. But after seeing the green fire die, I sensed that neither the wolf nor the mountain agreed with such a view.
This bag?
Simple first.